The telegram arrived at 145 Piccadilly on a grey December afternoon in 1936. It was not entirely unexpected, yet its arrival still carried the force of a physical blow. The Duke of York, known to his family as Bertie, was summoned to Fort Belvedere to see his brother, the King. Elizabeth waited, the familiar comforts of their home, the gentle ticking of the clock, the scent of beeswax polish, suddenly feeling fragile. When Bertie returned, his face told the story before he spoke. The King would abdicate. The unbearable weight of a crown they never wanted, a duty they had watched from what they thought was a safe distance, was now theirs. In that quiet drawing room, the life they had so carefully built together began to recede, replaced by the stark outline of a future they had never imagined and certainly never desired. The private dread behind the public duty had become their reality. To understand the depth of their reluctance, one must first understand the world they were forced to leave behind. 145 Piccadilly was not a palace, it was a home. A grand house, certainly, with its view over Green Park, but within its walls existed a rare and cosy domesticity. The garden was their private sanctuary, a place where the girls could play and Bertie could escape the formalities that so often tied his tongue. The contrast between this intimate, lively home and the cold, formal vastness of Buckingham Palace could not have been sharper. Here, at 145, life was filled with the sounds of laughter and the warmth of family. Elizabeth filled the house with raucous, joyful gatherings. Her Scottish family, the Strathmores, would descend, bringing with them a boisterous energy that was a world away from the staid court of King George V. There were evenings of charades, of music, of simple, happy noise. This was the life Elizabeth had crafted, a life that stood in stark opposition to the one her brother-in-law, Edward VIII, was living just down the road at Fort Belvedere. While he entertained a fast, fashionable set, the Yorks built their world around family and a small, trusted circle of friends. But as the autumn of 1936 deepened, a shadow fell over this happiness. A growing anxiety took root as the Abdication Crisis loomed. They felt deliberately kept in the dark about the King's true intentions, receiving only fragments of information. Elizabeth watched her husband with increasing concern. The strain was palpable. The cosy certainty of their life at 145 Piccadilly began to feel like a beautiful dream from which they were about to be rudely awakened. The feeling of being an outsider in one's own family drama was a peculiar form of torment. The house, once a fortress of contentment, now seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the outside world to crash in. The transition was brutal. Almost overnight, the Duke of York became King George VI, and the Duchess of York, his queen consort. The emotional toll on Bertie was immediate and severe. The stress triggered a recurrence of his stomach problems and exacerbated the stammer that had plagued him since childhood. For Elizabeth, watching this physical manifestation of anxiety in her husband was agonizing. Alongside her concern, a quiet, burning sense of betrayal toward Edward VIII and Mrs. Simpson began to solidify. They had not merely left a throne vacant. They had knowingly placed an immense, crushing burden on a man ill-equipped by nature and health to bear it easily. The new reality of Buckingham Palace life was overwhelming. They exchanged the sunlit rooms of Piccadilly for what felt like a museum, a maze of gilded corridors and echoing state apartments. The loss of privacy was absolute. Intimate family moments, once the cornerstone of their day, were now scheduled events, observed by servants and courtiers. Their new home was a cold, impersonal institution. In this crisis, Elizabeth's role transformed. She became far more than a consort. She was George VI's strategic partner, his confidant, his strength and stay. She attended meetings with him, a quiet but steadying presence. It was unprecedented for a queen consort to be present at such discussions, but the king depended on her calm judgment. She would sit, often knitting, a picture of domestic tranquility in the midst of constitutional turmoil, her presence giving him the courage to face his ministers. She became his anchor, the one person with whom he could be entirely himself, away from the judging eyes of the court. Her strength was now dedicated to shoring up his, a silent pact between them to face the coming storm together, a partnership forged in the fires of a crisis they never asked for. Then, the storm broke. The war they had dreaded became a reality, transforming their duty from a heavy ceremonial burden into a matter of national survival. The domestic struggles of the palace were suddenly dwarfed by the threat to the entire nation. And in September 1940, the war came directly to their new unwanted home. A German bomber, diving out of the clouds over London, targeted Buckingham Palace itself. A stick of bombs fell in the quadrangle, shattering windows and rocking the very foundations of the building. The King and Queen were in their sitting room. They felt the concussion, saw the column of earth and smoke rise outside. In the aftermath, it was Elizabeth who found the words that would define their wartime leadership. She said simply, "I'm glad we've been bombed. Now I can look the East End in the face." It was not a statement of bravado, but one of solidarity. The palace was no longer a sanctuary, it was a target, just like the terraced houses of London's East End. This shared danger forged a new, profound connection with the people. But Elizabeth's resolve went beyond symbolism. In the palace gardens, she practiced with a revolver, a quiet, determined preparation for a reality too grim to voice, the possibility of invasion. The cold, damp reality of the palace's air raid shelters became a regular part of their life, a stark contrast to the warm, firelit nursery they had left behind at 145 Piccadilly. Her days were now a relentless routine of visiting bomb sites, walking through streets reduced to rubble, her pastel dresses a deliberate beacon of hope amid the grey devastation. She would kneel in the debris to speak with families who had lost everything, her empathy a powerful antidote to despair. This was not a solitary mission. The strategic partnership that had begun in the abdication's aftermath deepened. She was a constant presence beside the king, not just as a comforting wife, but as a trusted advisor. Their meetings with Winston Churchill became a wartime fixture, while King George V would never have included Queen Mary in such strategic discussions. Elizabeth's presence was essential for George VI. He depended on her clarity, her intuition, and her unwavering calm. She was the steady hand on his shoulder, the quiet voice that could put a complex problem into perspective. The contrast between the pre-war domestic warmth they had cherished and the austere, relentless duty of wartime could not have been more extreme. Yet, in this crucible, the reluctant queen discovered a core of steel. Her role evolved from supporting a nervous king to embodying the nation's defiance. The warmth she had once poured into her family at 145 Piccadilly was now channeled into the heart of a country fighting for its existence. When peace finally came, the celebrations were bittersweet. The woman who had never wanted to be queen had become, in the words of the Nazi press, the most dangerous woman in Europe. Her gentle, unyielding spirit had infuriated Hitler and inspired a nation. The resilience forged in the fires of the Abdication Crisis and the Blitz had created an enduring symbol of strength. But the cost was etched on her husband's face. The war had taken a terrible toll on George VI's health, a sacrifice she felt deeply. The reluctant queen had become the monarchy's steadfast anchor, a legacy born not from ambition, but from a profound sense of duty and a protective love for her husband and country. In the end, the life she had protected, the very idea of a gentle, decent Britain proved stronger than the duty she had reluctantly embraced. A quiet triumph forged in the darkest of hours. If you found peace in this story of quiet strength, consider staying with us for more tales from the quiet corners of history.